processes and get that emergency handled. So I think what people talk about it and make bureaucracy look negative is red tapeism, is actually abuse of the bureaucratic process. Something that ordinarily should take 1 day. Somebody sits on a file for 1 month without treating that file. When ordinarily the action could have been concluded within 24 hours. You do that in government, probably in the ministry, you survive it. But you can't do that in anything, they fire you. Yeah. So that is the difference. So the bureaucracy in itself is not bad, but the abuse, and we need to differentiate.
Jabu, let's get you into this as well with regards to red tape. And looking at the South African context, we talk about sophisticated institutions and that we operate very differently relative to the rest of the continent. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we have adopted our National Development Plan in South Africa. And one of the key issues in there was to find an efficient, well-trained, effective, apolitical bureaucracy. That you get the best people that can do their jobs. President Jonathan spoke about the point earlier today to say the days of people leaving university thinking they'll find jobs in government are over. So it can never be you've got a guaranteed job in government. There just is not sufficient capacity in government to absorb people that are leaving jobs. So the issue of them getting skills that they can be good in private sector or in public sector is critical. So I certainly support the need that bureaucracy that is efficient is required. But when they step a line by not, in the private sector, we don't have a pending file box. We've got an in and an out box. We don't have pending. In government, there's pending 3, pending 6, pending 9. We don't have that in the private sector.
Michael, do you have pending boxes? I was going to say, do you have pending boxes at all? I highly doubt that. Pending boxes, is it something you have to contend with? But more importantly, onto what we see coming through by way, and this is a question that's actually come through from Velma Gooding on Twitter, and I'd like to amend her question slightly with regards to protectionist measures when it comes to the importation of goods out from Asia. It's something that a lot of African countries have been dealing with as well. We know that there's been a lot of complaints from the private sector with regards to cheap importations, cheaper products from the likes of China in particular, specifically hurting the likes of the South African textile industry. What is your stance on this? Do you think that there needs to be a change?
Well, we believe in free and fair trade, and all of us under the WTO rules, have trade remedy laws, anti-dumping laws, or laws against countervailable duties, unfair subsidies. And I think those laws are important to make sure that if imports are coming in and being dumped or are benefiting from unlawful subsidies, you've got some mechanism for it. It's a bit of an escape hatch to make sure that if one party is engaging in unfair trade, there's a way of dealing with it without bringing down the world trading system as a whole. So as a general matter, we think while it's important to have open markets, it only makes sense to have open markets if there's fair trade. And if somebody is engaging in unfair trade practices, it's important to have remedies against that.
Yes.
No, I just wanted to follow up on the point made by Michael. While the rules are there to protect countries from unfair trade practices, countries are also required to put in place national frameworks that enable them to take advantage of those international rules. And I think for most of Africa, except South Africa, I'm not sure how many countries in Africa have investigating authorities. We don't have one in Nigeria. I think one of the last assignments I did here in 2005 was to do the draft laws, which are somewhere between the Federal Executive Council and the National Assembly.
They're pending.
Bureaucracy. But actually, you need these domestic instruments because protection is a relative word. If you look at what we talk about today, global value chains, take the textile industry, for example. If I have a ginnery and I want President Jonathan to protect my ginnery, the output is an input into somebody else's production process. If I want you to protect my fabric is an input into somebody doing garments. So how do I balance the protection of one particular point in the value chain vis-a-vis the input of the next producer? But if you have an investigating authority, the requirements of how much representation of the industry is involved, how much injury is being caused, and the measure that government takes should be commensurate to the injury. Otherwise, you create distortions. And we should realize that trade is two ways. There are manufacturers who need imported inputs to be productive and efficient. So, and then the government also needs to protect the consumer. Because if you protect too much, the producer too much, the consumer suffers. If you protect the producer too much, sometimes those who earn their income on the supply chain, distributors, wholesalers, they also suffer. So you need to find that balance by putting in place those national frameworks that allow the rules to be applied in a transparent and consistent manner.
We have only a few minutes left, but before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you for a few closing remarks. As you ponder on that, Mr. President, I've got a few more questions for you with regards to the support that you have given the cement industry. Some have actually said that the production of cement is very expensive in Nigeria and that it could be doing also a disservice to the consumer, as Mr. Yonof had just been alluding to. Is there any point in time where you say, well, this sector is doing well enough, we've supported it, we've given as many subsidies, we've done an import ban on certain things or created tariffs? When do you let go of those levers?
No, I didn't really say it was very expensive. What I said that it's a program started by the government, federal government, before I became even a vice president, what we call backward integration. Cement consumption is quite big. We have the raw materials to produce cement. The one that is imported is a very small component of the cement. It's less than 25% of the cement. So why should a country that has over 80% of what it takes to produce cement, because of just about less than 20% of cement, import almost the whole cement? And so the government then felt that there must be a process that will encourage the local production. But yes, if you produce cement locally and compare to us at that time, some cement that were coming in from some other countries, that the production is quite cheap and with favorable government policies. Maybe a bag of cement, as at that time, if you bring it in, would have been slightly cheaper, slightly, not too much, than one produced here. But then the government felt that when you do that, you are not creating the jobs for your people, and you continue to import. It affects their foreign reserves and others, so that we will have this backward integration. In fact, now we are looking at it even in the sugar production, because we consume a lot of sugar in this country. And we feel that the only way to encourage people to produce sugar is how do they farm, produce the raw sugar for you to refine, instead of continuing to import it from the other countries. So it was a backward integration program of government. It's not as if the cost was excessive. But we are looking at the commodities we produce locally, and the ones that we have comparative advantage, where if we encourage, we can not just produce maybe just for Nigeria, but be able to even produce for export and encourage the company. So it's not really limited to cement alone. But I totally agree, just like the analysis, when you have the consumers, the ordinary people that consume commodity, you have those who market it, of course, you have the manufacturers. The manufacturer themselves get various items, the import or buy locally or outside to produce their goods. So while protecting a particular process, you must be mindful about the chain, and the government takes pains to look at it comprehensively before a position is taken.
We have to wrap up, so I'd like to get closing remarks from you, and again, this is all about finding the right way forward. to continue these growth rates, to close the inequality gap,